In long ago people times, or Kwade Kwadon, only First Nation people lived in the Yukon Valley. The land along the river near the city of Whitehorse has been our ancestral home for thousands of years. The Yukon River provided us with the necessities of life. We traveled and traded along the waterway according to our own laws and lifeways. The river represented life, renewal, and freedom. It has always been a large and important part of our spirituality. When newcomers arrived in our territory during the Klondike Gold Rush, our people were faced with sudden changes in their society, their culture, and their way of life. By the year 1920, Westerners have lived in our traditional territory for 50 years. For the first time in our people's history, we were governed by a society with values, customs, and rules much different from our own. Our people were displaced from many of their traditional campsites and moved to land called Indian reserves. We have been constantly moved from one reserve to another when industry requires the land. The responsibilities for the care and education of our children were taken from us. Many of our children were sent away to schools. Our proud people became people without rights. We adjusted to the many new ways of the newcomers while holding fast to the threads that tied us to our forebears and our traditional ways of life. Through all this, we remained people of the river, coming and going from our communities along the waterfront. This is another short, however important chapter of our history. It is our story of our journey back to the river.
In the 1920s and 30s, during a downturn in the global economy, fur-bearing animals became a valuable commodity in Yukon. Non-native trappers spread themselves far and wide in search of pelts, placing increasing pressure on the fish and wildlife resources. During this same time, the Yukon was experiencing a tourist boom, and native access to wildlife gave way to a form of tourism called trophy hunting. Hunting in Yukon was now encouraged for those who killed for sport, rather than those who depended on it for a living.
The native people never shoot anything and laugh about it or anything like that. You know, they thank the Holy Spirit for give us meat and stuff like that, you know, and they pray for it, you know. And they say, thank you very much, you know, that you give us your life to save our life, you know. That's how the native people is. They never kill anything. If they don't need it, they don't kill it, you know. And if they don't shoot a wild game just for sport or anything like that.
In 1942, our people witnessed a second great invasion of newcomers with the building of the Alaska Highway. Prior to the spring of 1942, the population of Whitehorse was approximately 400. With the arrival of American and Canadian servicemen and civilian workers, the population grew to over 8,000. Many of our people ceased their seasonal travels to work on the construction of the highway.
You see lots of native people working on the highway, and they're putting in culverts and stuff like that all the way down on Alaska Highway. The Army used their boats for transferring people across back and forth on the river, and that's what they used to do down here too, until they bring their own boat when they're building the bridge. My mother used to sew and stuff like that and sell it to the American people when they were here in Whitehorse. You know, my sister, everybody, all the native people used to sew and stuff like that and sell it, and they're still doing it today.
Then my mother used to wash clothes for them, and she bought a washing machine, you know, those little motorized washing machines. She had 2 of them. So she made quite a few money, good money anyway, in them days.
After the highway was built, the road network was expanded north toward newly discovered mineral deposits. In the late 1940s, the construction boom was over. Many people were traveling freely through Yukon. Returning to hunting and trapping for a living, our people became less certain about their future than ever before. The decrease in wildlife populations, combined with a sudden downward spiral in fur prices, made life extremely difficult for those practicing a traditional lifestyle. Hunting and trapping was the essence of our self-reliance. It was the one pathway still open to us to meet our needs, independent of outside interference. This pathway, however, was becoming narrower.
Me, Fred Smith, and Jimmy Miller, we used to, up in McCrae, you know, way back, there's old miner cabins all around it. We stayed in one winter. We choke squirrels, you know, we get $1 each for them. No, we don't get no welfare like from the government or anything. We want something, we gotta go out and get it. So we ran out of food once, and days were hungrier than hell, so we had a big pile of carcass of squirrels out in the back, all frozen. So we brought some in there and boiled the hell out of it and eat it. So then we had to walk to town. Maybe I had about 9 or 10 squirrel skin. We all chip in, you know, buy stuff there. We don't buy nothing fancy, you know, just dry food and stuff, a few cans of meat. But mostly we set rabbit snare and stuff.
Out of concern for the future of Aboriginal hunting, the federal government shifted its policy for Yukon Indian affairs. In 1945, the bureaucracy introduced new ways of improving our people's condition by introducing a variety of social programming. The residential school program was expanded, forcing more children into its network.
RCMP Indian Affairs come along and they pick us up and take us to school and put us in the train. There was about 20, 30, 40 kids, and when they put us in the train, they said, if you run away from here, we're gonna have to put your mom and dad in jail until we find you. So all the kids stayed in the train, so until we got to Carcross. When we got to Carcross, there's a great big truck there and loaded us all up on top of the truck, and they took us to school, and that's where I lose my my Tlingit language and my Southern Shoshone language, and I never did pick it up after that. I went to school after that. the native people didn't have no rights about anything. Now, it'd be nice if they come and ask their parents, like, can we take your kids to school, and then you can come and visit them anytime you want. But they didn't do that, you know. They didn't do that. So.
The completion of the highway north replaced river transportation. The stern wheelers were pulled from the river for the last time. Eliminated were the wood camps and other service positions. More of our people traded their seasonal mobility for permanent settlement near towns. In Whitehorse, the government involvement in our people's lives grew dramatically, as did the population of our people along the banks of the Yukon. Many took up residence on Reserve Number 8, called Marwell.
After when they cleared out this area, well, it was Lot 226, the old village, and that's where most of the First Nations people lived. Everybody looked out for each other, like the kids could play in the streets, and you always knew whose child was in your house, you know, where they lived, you knew the family and everything. So we were like one big family, and we were happy. You know, we didn't have much, but what we had was worth a lot. If we were bored, we found something to do. And not too far from the area, there was a store, and I recall candy was very, very cheap at that time. So for 25 cents, you could get a lot of candy, and you know, we were happy campers after that. People had their own little special hunting areas wherever they knew where they could go to get moose or whatever. They would go out with a few other members, and then if they were lucky at hunting, they'd come back and they'd share whatever they had. You know, they'd make a fire in the backyard and cook moose head. You know, it was nice because a lot of the elders would just drop by for tea, and they'd sit around, tell stories, and they would speak in their language, but a lot of the times they would explain what they were talking about, so we understood. You know.
Another guy too, that's old Wigwam Harry. You heard of him, huh? Yeah, he got a little carton board house on there, carton box house. I'd knock on his door one day. Come in, somebody say. I look around, I don't see him. There he was sleeping between two mattresses. One on the ground, one on top. And he never owned a blanket. Yeah. But he used to be a colorful man.
Other than a very few, our people living in the quaint structures along the Yukon were unaware of the growing consciousness of the general public toward the injustices of the world. The right to equality, the very nemesis of those living on Reserve Number 8 and Whiskey Flats and elsewhere in Yukon, was at the forefront. In 1960, the earliest Canadian expression of human rights law was enacted. The Bill of Rights took a direct stand against discrimination based on color, creed, or racial origin. For our people, the legislation was timely. The neighborhoods, built on historic fishing sites, were bulldozed by the ruling society to make way for accolades of their own, however brief, reputable history.
They called it Whiskey Flats. And we had a house there. Apparently my dad built a house there, and we were staying there. He passed away there, and all of a sudden we got a note, got to move out. So we had no choice but to move. We move out Marwell area. We stayed down there.
In Yukon, the 1960s became an era of unity for First People. Our leaders came to the forefront with frustration and fear that all First People in Yukon were in danger of losing their cultural identity. In 1973, the Northern Native Brotherhood, led by Kwanlin Dün chief Elijah Smith, delivered a document to Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau in Ottawa. The list of grievances and its approach to a settlement, called Together Today for Our Children Tomorrow, persuaded the government to negotiate a land claim. This decision reversed federal policy and set a precedent for all land settlements and Aboriginal rights across Canada.
During this time of waiting, the patient residents of Reserve Number 8 were offered an abandoned industrial lot west of the Alaska Highway, known as McIntyre Subdivision. Although reluctant to leave Reserve Number 8, consent to vacate the floodplain came only from the dreadful living conditions. Our people moved again. It was the first time in our history we have not lived near our sacred river. On February 19, 2005, after 30 years of negotiations, representatives for the Kwanlin Dün First Nation, the Government of Canada, and the Government of Yukon signed land claim agreements in Whitehorse. 6 weeks later, the Kwanlin Dün officially became the 10th self-governing Yukon First Nation when the agreement became enshrined in Canada's Constitution. This was a proud time for our people.
The Kwanlin Dün land claim agreements have a number of distinctive aspects. The city of Whitehorse and about 75% of Yukon's population lives within our traditional territory. We became the first Aboriginal nation in Canada to select and receive land within a designated city border. Our self-governing presence in an urban center creates unique issues, one of which is our long history and association with the Yukon River, and our people's longing to re-establish themselves on the Whitehorse waterfront.
Today, we celebrate our survival, our multiculturalism, and the diversity of our people. We have set a course of self-determination for a better future. The voices of the past are not all lost. There has been rising interest and manifest pride among our people. We are moving forward with commitment to family, community, and education. We are reviving our language and our culture. We have created remarkable bodies of art, literature, and drama. Our young people are reacquainting themselves with their past while looking forward to a stable future. The Kwanlin has once again become a meeting ground, a place where First Nations can come together along the river and proudly share their unique cultures and talents in a most hospitable atmosphere. We acknowledge the many challenges facing us all in regards to our natural and social environment. We make our ancestors proud by maintaining the traditions in which we can live in harmony with all that has been handed down to us. Kwanlin Dün welcomes all people to Yukon, our traditional territory, and our beautiful city. We encourage visitors to join us in our rightful place along the Yukon River and share with us our cherished legacy, preserved for all people and all generations.
Once in a while I'll go to that boat and I said, oh, this is where I used to stay. And now where we're staying, you know, we're river people. We're river people.
So it was really good living. You know, we had ducks, geese and stuff. Grandpa Joe used to set up old fish net along the beach, you know, and we catch a lot of ducks and geese and stuff like that.
I think it's a sense of peace that people get from being close to the water and being out on the land that's really important to their well-being.
Actually, all of the Yukon is beautiful to me. It's my home. Yeah.
Well, it's just like the Alaska Highway. We want to go, we use the river. We want to come uptown, we use the river.
For me, it's soothing. Like, you know, there's days where if I'm troubled, I go to the water.
You know, when people walk around there, when they walk through there, they got a lot of memories of the river.
A really big part of Kwanlin Dün relocating here at the waterfront and building this beautiful cultural center is reestablishing our presence here after all these years and giving our people the chance to come here knowing that this is our place and never to be relocated again. But as traditional hosts of the area, it also gives us this opportunity to become that again, to open our doors, to welcome people and to rediscover our culture and also to be in a position to share it with the world.